We're now going to tin the wires. And what that means is those exposed leads that we just twisted up, we're going to coat them in solder. So here I use this little hand, I don't know what we'll call it. Let's call it the grippy hands. There's some nice ones out there. These are the cheapies. You can get them on Amazon. And they're just there to hold the wire and whatever we're using in place so that we don't burn our hands. Makes things much easier. Turning on my soldering iron. My solder fan is in the background there. It's that yellow thing. And you'll see my soldering station, my Weller soldering station, the temperature is going up by Fahrenheit. So I normally set up for 580 degrees, and the temperature that you'll set yours to really will depend on the type of solder you're using, what you're working on. You don't want to go really too much hotter than you need it to be. And most regular solder that you'll use is lead tin base, which needs about maybe 580 Fahrenheit, which is what I choose, or about 350, 340 Celsius. Some people advocate for a really hot temperature because it goes faster. The problem is it's like baking a cake on 8,000 degrees. Like, yeah, it'll bake, but you'll burn your stuff up. So we're not going for the highest temperature. We're going for just as hot as we need so that we don't burn ourselves, we don't damage our components. Okay, now we're going to clean this soldering iron tip because check this out. At the tip of it, you can see it's not totally like shiny metallic. It's got some junk on it, like maybe old rosin or old solder. And believe it or not, that little tiny bit will keep the heat from transferring fully to our work. So we got to clean it off. So I'm going to melt a little solder on the tip. There's rosin in the solder that helps the solder flow and helps clean the tip. And then I'm going to drag the soldering iron in this tip cleaner here. And this is really important, and we're going to do this a lot as we work, and you should too, because you will find out it's so helpful to have a clean soldering iron tip. It really makes a difference. So if you're having trouble melting solder or getting a good solder joint to happen, clean your tip. So let's get to work. All right, we're going to start out with that ground wire that we used before. So it's stranded, so there's little tiny strands of wire in there. You can see they kind of come apart if I push on it. But what we're going to do is apply solder to those strands so they all kind of join together, and it'll be much easier to work with. So here we go. We're going to put the wire in the grippy hands, as you can see there. And now remember this, the solder will flow to whatever is hottest. There's a lot of kind of wonky ways to solder stuff, but here's the good way. This is how you're going to do it. I apply heat to the thing I want the solder to go to. So I apply the iron to the wire. And then I bring the solder to, I'm kind of touching both the wire and the iron at the same time. And if the wire is hot enough, the solder will flow right into it. It'll absorb like a sponge. And that is what you want. You'll get a good, clean connection. It'll be super easy to work with later on. And it was really no trouble. All right, let's get super nerdy and get slow-mo. And you can see maybe, if we're lucky, the solder just wick right up into that wire. So that's it. Okay, you're an old pro now, so we're going to graduate onto those RCAs that we worked on before. So I clean the soldering iron. Good practice as always. We're going to heat up the shield on one of those cables. And then here comes the solder. I kind of cheated a little bit, but there we go. And you can see it just wick into that shield. All right, moving on. Go into the hot cable. So there we go. I touch the solder to the tip just to clean a little bit. And now we got to get clean tip. Heat applied first, solder. And there we go. So the solder will go where the heat is. So all I got to do is just get that copper hot, and then I'm good. It looks like that. The other conductor went well. Let's go with the shield on the other side. Here comes the heat and the solder. And there we go. So as you can see, usually kind of touching after I get the heat on the wire, touching the solder to the iron kind of gets it flowing through the wire. And there we go. So that's not too bad. I like to kind of clean up the ends a little bit. So let's do that now. All right, so we're looking good. So we learned how to strip some wires, and then we tinned the leads. We tinned the ends of the wires to make them much easier to work with later on. We learned a few soldering things. Thanks for joining. I'll see you in another video.